O-Level Islamiyat Notes. Paper 1. Dr. Iftikhar Ul Haq. 033342513. Major Themes of the Quran. P1Q1. Total mark 4 marks for 2a parts and 4 marks for 2b parts of the 2 passages chosen out of the given 3 passages. In a parts, describe the main themes contained in the passages, highlighting the key words or phrases. In b parts, explain the importance or relevance of the themes for daily living of the Muslims. Passage 1. Verse of the Throne, 2:255. A theme. Theme of this long verse of a Medinian surah, Al-Baqarah, is Tawhid. It outlines God's inimitable attributes that distinguish him from his creatures. The words Al-Hayyu Al-Qayyum, the ever-living and self-subsisting, refer to his creative and sustaining force behind his existence. God is free from human weaknesses and needs such as tiredness or sleep. His authority encompasses the entire universe, and he remains totally uninfluenced in establishing his writ over his created world. The word kursi signifies both his authority and knowledge about all his domain, because he is its sole creator. Therefore, none of his creations can escape his knowledge in the remotest parts of the universe. It further emphasizes God's unique right of exercising his authority in a way that none can dare influence him. The passage ends with the words Huwal Aliyyu al-Azim, that represent his ultimate supremacy and exaltedness. The Quran repetitively mentions God's supreme status, such as, God be exalted, the true King, the Lord of the throne of grace. 23:116, Al-Mu'minun. B. Importance of the theme. The passage strengthens the belief of the Muslims in Tawhid in terms of God's oneness, uniqueness, majesty and glory. So, it trains them to condemn shirk, as humans are vulnerable to go astray under the influence of Satan. There is repetitive mention of God's knowledge and powers in order to instruct them to worship and depend on him alone. The message of this verse frees the believers from fear of all other powers, visible and invisible. By believing in God's absolute powers, Muslims tend to develop his fear, and thus become more humble and submissive towards him. Muslims usually recite this verse as an invocation for protection of their lives and belongings. The Prophet is reported to have said, "Whoever recites Ayat al-Kursi after every obligatory prayer, nothing prevents him from entering paradise except death." Therefore, Muslims recite the Ayat al-Kursi while leaving their valuables at or outside home. Passage 2. Al-Naam, 6:101-103. A theme. The 3 verses are part of Surah Al-Naam, a late Makkan surah. Theme of the verses is God's absolute uniqueness. They were revealed to prepare the Muslims to interact with the Christians and Jews living in Medina, who had corrupted the belief of Tawhid. The passage begins with the word Badi that refers to God's unique power to create anything out of nothing. He only commands be, and it so happens. It proceeds by targeting any false belief of God having a son or a consort, because he is beyond any such human needs or relationship. The next verse stresses on God being the sole creator and having power to dispose of all affairs. These unmatchable attributes convince the Muslims to worship none but him. Verse 103 states God's absolutely sublime nature that refers to human inability to conceptualize him in any way. However, God has perfect knowledge of all his created world. This is endorsed by another Quranic verse that says, "For God is he who understands the finest mysteries." hours 63 minutes, Al-Hajj. B. Importance of the theme. This passage helps Muslims refine their belief of Tawhid in terms of God's unique nature and powers. Its main objective is to emphasize on monotheism and exclusive divine powers, as against polytheism and paganism. Muslims are taught to believe in God's absolute oneness that had been corrupted by the misguided communities repeatedly in the past. Thus it removes any trace of confusion about God's existence from the hearts of Muslims. Moreover, they develop a sense of God's omniscience that helps them follow the right path. At another place the Quran reminds the same as, "And he is with you wheresoever you are." 57-4, Al-Hadid, it, therefore, teaches them about their limitations regarding God's personification and configuration. Thus they refrain from committing any form of shirk. According to the Mufassirin, commentators of Quran, when this surah was being revealed 70,000 angels were assigned to accompany it. Therefore its recitation has a strong enlightening impact on the hearts of Muslims as they remain away from satanic misguidance. Passage 3. Surah Fussilat, 41:37. A. Theme. This verse is from Surah Fussilat, Mim, an early Makkan surah, revealed to the Prophet after the conversion of Hazrat Hamza. The Prophet was in the Kaaba, where the Makkans were trying to bribe him and get rid of the jinns they thought had affected the Prophet. The surah was recited in response to their ridiculous views. This verse counters the corrupted Makkans' belief of associating the sun and the moon as partners with God. The verse describes Tawhid by referring to the heavenly bodies and the cyclic pattern of day and night. It forbids worshipping these objects, as they merely reflect God's powers. Their magnanimity and glow teach the people of wisdom the immense powers of their Creator. So the verse teaches that all creatures represent God's omnipotence, omniscience and wisdom. The Quran supports the same theme by saying, "Behold, in the creation of the heavens and earth, in the alternation of the night and the day, are signs for the people who are wise." 2:164, Al-Baqarah. B. Importance of the theme. This verse urges Muslims to observe various objects of nature that reflect God's existence, majesty and glory. Such observation encourages Muslims to develop a strong belief in God's marvels and powers, and therefore, trains them to reject all forms of shirk. For this reason, the Quran adopts a challenging tone while mentioning the immaculate universe of God. It says, "You will never see any imperfection in the creation of the most compassionate." 67:3, Al-Mulk. It tells them that there must be a supreme power to control and sustain such a wonderful and complex universe. Thus it makes them more humble before God. Moreover, they realize their limitations about seeing God in this world, thus reinforcing their belief in the unseen. Passage 4. Surah Al-Shura, 42:5. A. Theme. The two verses are from Surah Al-Shura, revealed in Makkah shortly after Surah Fussilat. The Makkans used to accuse the Prophet of crafting the Quranic verses. The two verses were, therefore, revealed in response to their doubts and surprise over the teachings of the Quran. These verses continue the message of the preceding verse that says, "Thus God the Almighty, the Knower sends inspiration to you as to those who were before you." They teach that there is nothing strange or new about God's revelations, as they had been sent all through the ages. The Quranic teachings about Tawhid contradicted the Makkans' beliefs about idolatry. The verses emphasize on God's unshared authority over entire universe in contrast to the lifeless idols made by the pagans. They also mention the effect of God's might on the heavens that hardly sustain the divine burden. Finally, the verse 5 mentions the countless angels who are busy in praising Him and seeking forgiveness for the misguided humans. B. Importance of the theme. These verses make Muslims understand the similarity between the Quran and the previous revelations. Thus they teach Muslims to respect other religions as the source of all revelation is one God. They help Muslims to tread the path of Tawhid and stay away from shirk. They tell Muslims about God's power and glory in order to make them His obedient and genuine servants. By referring to the angels seeking forgiveness for humans, they tell about God's mercy and love. Humans, because of their free will and a vulnerability to Satan, can commit sins, but God is the most merciful and forgiving. This is frequently promised in the Quran, O my slaves who have transgressed against themselves. Despair not of the mercy of God, verily God forgives all sins. 39:53, Al-Zumar, belief in God's mercy and forgiveness prepares Muslims to repent over their misdeeds, and retain the hope of being pardoned by God. Passage 5. Al-Ikhlas, 112. A. Theme. This early Makkan surah was revealed in an answer to several queries of pagans and the Jews about God. The Jews wanted to compare the Quranic concept of God with that given in the Torah. Similarly, pagans asked about the ancestry of God. The Prophet awaited the divine guidance and this surah was revealed. The surah sums up the absolute oneness of God by referring to His uniqueness in person, Tawhid fil Zat. God's name Al-Ahad summarizes His absolute oneness. His perfection and His sublime nature are expressed in the word Al-Samad that also implies His freedom from time and space, as well as any progeny. The surah categorically rejects the false belief of God having ancestors or descendants. Due to its conciseness, the Prophet declared, "By Him in whose hand my life is, it is equal to 1/3 of the Quran." B. Importance of the theme. Surah Al-Ikhlas is so called because it purifies the most fundamental Islamic belief of Tawhid. It negates all false notions about God being the descendant or ascendant of anyone, as was believed by many misguided communities and the pagans of Makkah. It declares absolute oneness and uniqueness of God in an affirmative tone. Thus, it strengthens the belief of Muslims in Tawhid and keeps them from committing any form of shirk, especially shirk fil Zat. For the same reason, the Prophet encouraged Muslims to recite this surah regularly in order to earn the reward of reciting 1/3 of the Quran. Once, Hazrat Anas bin Malik told him about his love for this surah. The Prophet replied, "Your love for it will admit you into paradise." There are blessings attached with God's names mentioned in this surah. A hadith highlights the importance of Al-Samad as, any supplication using this grand divine name is sure to be granted.